Okay, I don't see Devin coming in. So I think we could go ahead and get started. We might skip the item that she had asked to be put on the agenda till she comes in. So let's see. This is the April 9th meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Subcommittee of the Transportation and Parking Committee. We are in hybrid mode, so we've got 2 members in person and then 3 members, it looks like, on participating remotely. So welcome. We've got a couple of items on the agenda here, and then but let's start with public comment for anything that's not otherwise on the agenda, which is mostly just updates. So if anybody has a public comment, raise your virtual hand or your real hand. And
you're on the committee.
We can go ahead with that. Claudia is in person, and go ahead, Claudia. I will unmute you.
Yeah, okay, Claudia Lefko, 40 Valley Street. I've been here before. I just want to say it's not that easy coming to the meetings because I've been here before and I'm sort of have the same ask. And so it seems somehow almost humiliating to show up again. Nonetheless, here I am. I'm here because in Montview, our neighborhood, we've once again formed a street and sidewalks working group. And obviously we're focusing on the streets and sidewalks. And one of our goals is to connect more regularly with this committee in its work. And so I sent you all things I have sent you before. And I guess my plea over and over again is to ask you to try to, I mean, we really need the support of the pedestrian and bicycle committee to help us think outside the box of how to safeguard and improve and even make walking possible in Montview. It is a big pedestrian walk area, and it's very, very dangerous. Not only is it dangerous, but you know, it's an inviting area. People want to walk there, but there isn't really the accommodation for this. So as I said in my email to all of you, it doesn't really fit into any kind of planning the city is going through around streets and sidewalks. Anyway, we never show up on what is in the planning. 26 we'll have our chance, but we can't, we work on our own. I mean, we've cooperated with the city for the first 3 years. We did all the traffic calming things you needed to do. But we can't keep working on our own and then come up against a brick wall, which is sometimes the city. So I'm particularly asking that when grants come up that might apply in any way to walkability in the city, in our neighborhood, that you would be willing to support us in that, because citizens are useful people to the city, and we're doing this work, but we need support, and part of what we need support is if we find a grant that we're after, we want to be a trust that the city or the committee would work with us to get it. So I'm urging you to please look at the Smith study. It really has a lot of information and shows you what terrible situation we're in, and also the Deirdre walkway, because streets and sidewalks are really about people more even than construction. And I think the thinking now has to do with connectivity, and people really are trying to think of different ways to move people aside from a concrete and curbed sidewalk. So I'm grateful that you let me come to the meetings. I appreciate your interest, and I hope to have your support. And if I have one more minute, one thing our goal of our working committee is we've joined up with the Week Without Driving, which we did last week. We set up a table in front of City Hall, but I actually didn't get that people were actually not supposed to drive for the whole week. I thought it was a kind of, or just a heads up, you shouldn't drive. But this year we're taking it very seriously, and we're starting planning now to sign people up to commit not to drive for a week. So we hope the committee will also be supporting that, and we'll be back to you with more information. So thanks.
Thanks, Claudia.
Claudia, you sent information to the committee. Where did that go? And I don't remember receiving anything.
It might have been it was several weeks ago.
No,
I
it was
think.
just the other day in response to the announcement of the meeting. I responded to the listserv.
Oh, I don't know that I got that. I will check and forward it on. But typically when any information comes to the committee, we just forward it on to committee members.
So if I respond to the announcement, it doesn't go out to the committee members? It came from a listserv that, Bike and Pedestrian.
I don't know what listserv you're talking about. When I post the agenda, it goes on the calendar. So I don't know if someone sent you that
From the
posting.
calendar. Okay, well, when I get home, I'll send it out, but I should send it to you.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Yep.
sorry.
Okay.
So then anyway.
Yeah, I would thought
Thanks
you were
for
referring.
asking.
Sure.
I
No,
thought you were referring to a previous email correspondence that you sent.
No, because it's a complicated issue, and so it doesn't matter. You don't read it before, you can read it after.
Okay.
But so I'll send it when I get home. Thanks. Thanks for listening.
Anybody else with public comment? Okay. So, let's see, next on the agenda is, so, I had put on there public comment related to any comments that might come up related to the high school, but we didn't have any of those, so I'll skip that to the next agenda item. Brett, you had wanted to discuss asset management, and sort of ideas of what might, be helpful for, I think, the city. So I'll hand that over to you, as the next agenda item.
Yeah.
Yes, hold on. Whoops. Forgot to make him co-host.
Thanks. Wait, Carolyn, did you say we're skipping the first item?
The first item was related to if there was any public comment during the public comment session about high school items. So there was
Wait.
no public comment. So
No, I thought the second item on the agenda was response to public comment from last month. No?
it could be, yes. So if you want, we did
mean, there's-
have
there's-
comments from.
The first
Yeah.
agenda item is public comment. The
Yeah.
second one is response to public comment related to the high school. So I was figuring that that's where people are looking to speak.
Okay. Sure. So yeah, so that would be for committee members to talk about the comments from the last discussion or last public comment for the high school. So go ahead if you like. We can do that one before we go to the asset management.
Does anybody want to start off? I think we all wanted to talk about this more, if I recall correctly. But it was probably me who asked to put it on the agenda.
Yeah, go for it.
It just seems like it's a very it's a subject, it's a project that has many stakeholders, and so I feel that we should be talking about it every meeting until it's resolved. It's such a important intersection of many users in our city. And And I know that there are people who are trying to think outside the box and trying to think inside the box, and that there's a lot of competing interests. I was part of a meeting with Donna and some other folks who were very interested in, how can we make this a successful project? And so I thought maybe there might be public comment here on this item as well. But I guess for me, I just still feel concerned about speeds in that area. With any design, I want to make sure that we are choosing a design that is prioritizing low traffic speeds.
So just to respond, so we've taken, all the feedback that's come in through this subcommittee as well as TPC has been collected and given to the consultant. And so the design is not complete. But there wouldn't be updates at every single meeting because the design process obviously takes a while. So, we could potentially have a standing item on the agenda, but there may not be any updates. So, I think the process has been that there would be there've been a couple of iterations of that public comment, and that's been incorporated into sort of the designer's process to try to address, and sort of that's been expanding depending on the constituency and the stakeholders. But at this point, I don't think we have an update, but I can obviously hand it over to Donna because it's her project. And she probably has more details about that.
No, probably. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just have a quick comment. I mean, this is a little bit tricky for us as, we go through the city and try to pave roads and sort of, repair sidewalks and get on top of our infrastructure. I mean, this high school project has been in development since 2021. And, we have engaged a consultant who's come up with, a feasibility study and conceptual design for us. And we're sort of coming down the home stretch of design. And what's very difficult is, like, we certainly understand the community interest in the project, and there has always been community interest in the project. But as we go through this process, there is a cost associated with design, and we've gone through, several meetings around this. And I think a lot of different stakeholders have a lot of different opinions on what they'd like to see and how they'd like to see it. And at a certain point, we do have to move forward. And there is expense associated with going back to the consultant and saying, well, we want to add this, or we want to do that, or we want you to put this here, or move this there, or whatever. And I think it's just important to note, and this was kind of what I tried to talk about in the meeting that I had sort of offline with the group a couple of weeks ago, is that this project has been in development for several years now. And, we had a lengthy discussion about this at TPC. We talked about roundabouts. We talked about, trials of less restrictive measures, and eventually landed on traffic signals. So I just think it's important to sort of understand the context that we're working in. And, I'm happy to continue to engage with folks, but to sort of blow up the design, after we're like several $100,000 into this and closing in on 100% design is a very, very difficult position to put the city in, to put planning in, to put DPW in. And again, we're trying to satisfy all stakeholders, and there are a lot of them. And that's our challenge. So I don't have any specific updates today other than to say, we're continuing to take everyone's comments into account, but understand that there are a lot of different constituencies who have a lot of different needs around this project, and we have to try to build a good project that will satisfy as many people as possible. So that's my comments. Thanks for listening.
I would just add, of course, and Brett, you've mentioned, that speeds are really, critical component, and that's certainly been part of the, in the background, that's been understood from the beginning. I don't think that's something new at all. So I think that's sort of been part of the conversation about how do we manage and ensure that those speeds stay within, and to slow those speeds. So that's definitely something that's been on the table since the beginning of this. So any other committee comments on the high school project? Okay. So if there are no committee comments, I can open it up for 1 minute for Alex Bowman.
Hi, yeah, I'm probably the one who's the frustration is directed at, no problem. With me being the one who's causing the issues and throwing in new ideas at this point in the game.
Not new.
Okay, or ideas that have been discussed. Apologies for that comment. Just trying to get the best human scale design for people that are walking through here. I know it's a challenge. I know that it's just, I keep hearing contradictory information where we're taking feedback, but then we're not taking feedback. So that's why I've been a bit confused. I keep hearing, well, we're listening to feedback, but then I don't hear that you're actually listening to it. So I apologize for misunderstanding those comments. I do, I'm sorry to hear that it sounds like it has been finalized that this um, is a traffic signal project. And um, I was talking to a city councilor who's on the transportation committee, and he thought it was still open. And I understand that design isn't complete um, until it's complete. So I was hoping there was some flexibility. I think that is a mistake to, and again, we don't know what the design is. We don't know what the feedback has been. So um, it's, we don't know where, there's not any clear project page. So it's just trying to provide alternatives that meet goals that are focused on providing great safety and a great intersection to pedestrians and cyclists and folks who use assisted mobility devices. So I'm just trying to, uh, not having all the information or not having the background about what's been tossed out other than um, discussion. It's, I don't have all the information, so I'm trying to still go for a solution uh, that seems to be better at slowing down traffic with using natural devices as opposed to signals. Based on NACDO suggestions and features that they suggest. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, Danny, 1 minute.
It's muted.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to note that, not everybody here was in that conversation. So one thing that kind of came out of it was that the signals are going to cost, I think, about $750,000. So if there was a little bit of money to be reallocated towards design at this stage, it would probably be made up if we ended up without signals or with one less signal at the end, in an effort to kind of focus a little bit more on slowing the speed, the design speed in front of the high school.
Thanks. Okay, I don't see, Deb here, so, I'm gonna skip the next item and just go to some updates. And I think Donna, you're up, and then I'm gonna come back to the Earl Street, West Street, because and actually, frankly, I can't remember if she said she wasn't able to be here, but she wanted it to be put on the agenda. So I'll circle back to that item after we do a few of the updates. So if Donna, you want to go ahead with other DPW updates.
Asset management tracking.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, we're not gonna skip that. So why don't we go to that, and then Donna, hold on. We'll do the other item. Sorry about that. So Brett, sort of circling back, you would, were interested in having a conversation about, what, tools might be available, I think, to, provide feedback on, issues that might need to be addressed. I think you could probably, go ahead.
I'll try. So it is my understanding that the city is in multiple departments working on figuring out the best system and software and logistics for implementing some kind of more comprehensive ability for citizens to report problems and then for the city or somebody to respond to those. One piece of software that has been named in discussions outside of these meetings is C-Click Fix. And that is one of the options that the city is looking at, is my understanding. And so I thought maybe we would talk for a moment, see if there's anything that this subcommittee wants to weigh in on in terms of more global, what features would we want to see in that kind of system, and what ideas do we have around that? So what problems would we think that this would be solving, and do we have any suggestions for best methods? So for me, I mean, I've heard things talked about, things like sidewalks, Claudia. I've heard, problems with sidewalks, whether it be snow removal of sidewalks or just, particularly broken sections, impassable. Maybe it's vegetation that's along sidewalks, which I know is a bane of the DPW's existence. And that could also relate to rail trails. We've talked in this meeting before about rail trail clearing. It could be any number of things. It could be potholes. City already has a system for potholes, but maybe this will be a comprehensive system. So anyway, I thought maybe we'd talk about how, this kind of system would be most helpful for bicyclists and pedestrians in the city. So I wanted to open it up to anybody else on the subcommittee who has thoughts or suggestions for that kind of system. Thanks.
I have a question, a follow-up question, actually, and this is for you, Donna. Currently, what's your system cover now when people, is it mostly potholes, or does it sort of range is it a whole host of issues that people can call in and submit a work order on?
Yeah, it's anything, right? And I mean, we get work orders through a variety of different means and a variety of different systems, and they could be anything from like, please remove this animal from the side of the road, to, there's a bush growing over the sidewalk. It's really a grab bag. Like, you never know what you're gonna get when you get an email from the system.
So that's interesting about the vegetation and the snow removal, because that's obviously the property owner's responsibility. And it's hard to, you know, I think we've grappled with this for a number of years about the best way to go about, you know, is it a public service announcement that goes through the city councilors, and maybe the city councilors can organize, you know, cleanup weeks or something like that, so that property owners understand what their responsibilities are. Or if in fact it does become part of a, you know, asset management, if for lack of better word, for that kind of maintenance, that then maybe gets targeted to a different pile rather than a DPW pile. I don't know. I obviously don't know what the solution is, but there's any number of software programs out there that people will want to sell you for this. And so, but it's probably good to understand, get ideas from this committee about what you all think might be something important to include that either is not already being tracked or could be tracked differently or what have you. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah. I've had experience with the just the reporting stuff to the city, you know, most recently, and I'm sure there were multiple reports of huge potholes on Jackson Street right by the school that got almost immediately flagged with a cone so that it, you know, kind of dealt with the immediate hazard and was dealt with later. I guess I'm not sure. There are a couple things that seem to be brought up there. You know, we had this what seemed like an incredibly perfect storm in terms of, you know, removal. And I saw, you know, store owners and the DPW and homeowners, like everyone was snow, rain, ice, snow over that period, just made for an incredible difficult situation. The side streets weren't, you know, because there just wasn't that capability. It was just kind of getting hammered by it. So I'm not sure exactly what the part is on this of the sidewalk clearing, which is the responsibility of the homeowner or the business owner. Um, is it trying to improve that signaling system? Because my understanding is that it's the police that enforces that ordinance. Again, I'm not sure what problem, and maybe Brett could clarify what problem we're trying to solve here. Realizing that there are going to be times when, you know, things are just stretched and, you know, it's going to have to be prioritized what actually gets addressed with safety and other things. So again, I'm just a little confused.
Yeah, so that you definitely hit on one of the major factors of any system, which is the trade-off between, we want it to be really easy to use so that people actually use it and aren't just grumbling about something, but and actually tell the city that there's something to do to be fixed, versus making sure that it isn't overused or abused, you know, for every tiny little thing that you know doesn't need to go to the city to be addressed or isn't appropriate to go to the city to be addressed this way. So that was definitely one of the tensions that, you know, I'm most curious about. How can we design, you know, how can we choose a system that's easy to use so that it actually gets used, but without being overused and causing, you know, 1,000 work orders to be created that, you know, 900 of which are essentially spurious. The other question I had was, I guess this is for Donna, assuming that the DPW would probably be the main place that any is now and would be probably in the future, you know, if we change the system. Is there a way for you to offload some of the things that aren't super high priority, things like sidewalk clearing and vegetation that homeowners are responsible for, but either may not be aware of or or are being negligent about. You know, could I volunteer? Could somebody volunteer to speak to property owners if given a list? Is that something the city can authorize somebody to do, to pass that information on? You know, I'm just curious if there's a way to harness volunteer energy.
Yeah, one of the things that we try to do with vegetation on sidewalks, which though it's thinking about now, but they will be in a few months, what I have started to do is to try to engage the ward counselor to assist us in contacting the homeowner. You know, a lot of times we just don't have a lot of success in you know, kind of convincing people to follow the ordinance. So that's where we engaged the ward counselor, and we find that we actually have a little more success doing it that way. I would certainly be open to suggestions for, you know, maybe this group or, you know, a volunteer group, like Friends of the Trails or something. If, you know, I would be open to suggestions around if we have particular targeted areas, but I think in general, you know, these are sort of enforcement of city ordinances that can't really be delegated to, outside of, you know, city staff or elected officials who are interfacing with their constituents. I mean, I'd certainly be open to suggestions, whatever they might be. I'm just not sure to what extent we'd be able to offload this.
Maybe we could post a list of all the items that come in for vegetation clearing or snow clearing on sidewalks. Here are all the
Humiliation.
ones that came in the city. Do you know anybody? Anybody else on the committee before we go to Claudia? Okay. go for it.
I think there are two levels of concern. One is like the snow and removal and so forth, which is an immediate short-term problem. And then there's the long-term problem, i.e. the crumbling sidewalk, you know, and the upheaval sidewalk. And so for us, it's been hard to even figure out how the city responds. Like we had a woman, you know, fall out of her wheelchair on the corner of Williams and Holyoke Street, and an ambulance came to take her away, and she was 2 weeks in rehab. And when we tried to figure out, well, how does that list, where is that listed in the city, we couldn't tell. Somebody, not I, but somebody called the police, somebody probably called DPW. So where are these accidents recorded, you know, and how are they responded to? But in terms of what you're saying, Brett, I think it's a great idea. And maybe Donna, rather than even the city councilor, I mean, so many wards have like neighborhood associations. Like in Ward 3, we have a neighborhood association, and they do cleanups, you know, and it could be part of the neighborhood association. Like this year on July 20th, we're all going to look at our sidewalk and our shrubs and make sure they're not, you know, just to put it on some sort of an agenda into the neighborhoods rather than even on the city councilor. I mean, the problem, you know, as I see it again with Brett, because we've talked in our neighborhood about this click fix, you know, and for my money, you know, it would just be an incredible burden on the city. You would be flooded with these click fix things and you'd have nobody to fix them, you know. So it's, I don't know, it doesn't, I think a solution is always a better one, that you put it on people, because I think everybody does care that the sidewalks are clear, because we need to get around. And so, you know, it's like sort of a neighborhood standard or something. And I feel like put it back into the neighborhoods is a good idea for my money, you know.
Thanks. Danny, did you just raise your hand?
Yes,
Go
hi.
ahead.
I just wanted to say about C-Click Fix that it's had a lot of success in many places. And even if you can't address as a city every single thing that comes in, it tends, I think, to function as sort of a voting sort of a thing. If one person complains about something and the city doesn't get to it, that may happen in backlog situations. But if 10 people point to the same pothole, then maybe it really is an issue that's affecting a huge number of people, not just one person. And so by getting data, you have something to work with.
Thanks. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I pulled up the city website right now since we're talking about it. Because I'll confess, I don't know where to go if there's something wrong with my street. So I go to the main page and, you know, one of the buttons right at the top is how do I, which this seems like a good situation that it would fall in, like how do I report something? And I don't see a single link there about how to like report a crumbling sidewalk or overgrown bushes or a huge pothole or X, Y, or Z. Like there's nothing, even like in that long list, if I read the whole thing, there's nothing there that seems to do what I want to do. Never mind like an easy button. Like this seems like it's a catch-all that should be like a really big button, like report something. So I think something like a see, click, fix, or some sort of central repository of information with a nice, big, easy button to find on the website, I think would help. And like Danny mentioned, I think, you know, if you get like numerous reports about the same thing, I think that helps prioritize issues for you, Donna, about maybe what seems most critical or what should kind of rise to the top of your to-do list, perhaps.
Well,
All
thanks
right.
all for
Thanks.
your comments. That's helpful for me in thinking about it. I'll keep thinking about it, and if I think of something else, I'll let Donna or somebody else know. But I thought I should bring it to everybody's attention and try to group think it through.
Great. Thanks, Brett. All right, so, excuse me, next on the agenda was an item that Devin, had asked to be put on just as a, because she has, had conversations with, an individual who's concerned about the width of the intersection at Earl and West Street and the crossing and the, speeds of, turning vehicles and vehicles moving, you know, through that intersection. And just wanted that as a item on the agenda. I don't know if there's been a formal submission of, let's say, I'm not sure if it would come in under traffic calming or not, but I don't know, Donna, if you've seen anything come through officially under traffic calming for that intersection at all. I don't think it's necessarily about speeds. It's more about narrowing, or looking at the potential for narrowing the crossing there, for both cyclists and pedestrians that are coming up off the bike path or coming into town. So just sort of as a flag on that.
Yeah, we've been looking at that intersection for years, plural, to just try to figure out how to stripe that a little bit differently, or, you know, get sort of some sort of painted curb extensions in there. We batted around a bunch of concepts sort of internally. We talked about, you know, putting some red paint in there to kind of catch people's eyes. Red paint is extremely expensive, by the way. So you know, we've kind of gone through a bunch of different iterations on what we would like to see at that intersection. And, you know, we're not in a position where we're ready to advance anything at this point, but we are aware of it, and it's been a topic of conversation for a few years.
Okay. Great. Go ahead, Brett.
Thanks. Donna, is this a place where the beautiful lime green cement barriers would be a test case place?
Well, it's funny you say that. I agree that this would potentially be a good spot for that. Mass DOT is actually scheduled to be doing a little bit of work here. And I don't know what their schedule is, but I would, you know, definitely entertain trying to shrink this down. I mean, there's just so much asphalt. It's just a question of how we would shrink it. I mean, there's definitely truck traffic through here, so we do have to be careful with that. We don't want trucks hung up on the barriers, you know, so we just need to be mindful of that. So I need to just make sure Mass DOT, isn't going to be doing something there that's potentially going to interfere with an installation, and then we can think about what you're describing.
Is that lime green paint cheaper than the street green paint or the red paint?
The barriers are cheap.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
I'm glad to hear about kind of some of this creative place on there, because I share some of these concerns. I'm guessing the answer is no, since it hasn't gone through the formal kind of traffic calming system. But do we have any sense of accident rates or other kind of things that are motivating besides kind of anecdotal?
I would have to go back and look, but I actually believe there was a traffic calming application submitted on this. It was a number of years ago. So I would have to go back and look and see if we pulled accident data at the time. Whatever it is, it's, kind of stale at this point, and I would want to look, at more updated numbers, like from the last 3 years instead of, from 2018.
Be also interesting to see what truck traffic is going through there, because it was designed, I think, at a time where there was an assumption there would be a lot of industrial use on the southern part of the state hospital, and that just hasn't materialized. And so I think it was overbuilt for something that's just not there.
Yeah, I mean,
Go
if you
ahead.
look at the turns, like there's such wide sweeping turns that they invite like
Yeah.
not really slowing down
Yeah,
if you're taking that turn and just kind of cruising around it.
in
So-
either direction, like all directions.
Yes, yes, yeah. So anything like discussed that could kind of pinch that a little bit, whether it's paint that just gives a mental kind of push for people to slow down, or barriers, which would be a physical impediment, would be welcomed, I think.
All right, thanks for that. I'll give Devin the link so she can listen in when she gets a chance. So then I guess we're just up to updates, and Donna, you're welcome to go first on your update list.
Yep, so our contractor has remobilized to finish up the bike path, so they're doing some curb ramp, sidewalk work. That's going to be ongoing for a couple of months. The good news is we won't need a full closure of anything. I mean, there's definitely fencing up and some barriers, but we just need to work around them, and the contractor will be done hopefully within a couple of months, and we can close the books on that project. Second thing is we've been cleaning up the bike path downtown. So really from like the Hampton Ave parking lot all the way out to the underpass, down behind King Street, that runs along King Street. So I've had a contractor working in there for like the last month, and they've made really significant progress, cut back a lot of that vegetation that was like hanging into the path, and I hope that will be a much more pleasant experience for users of that section of the trail. And we've made a pretty significant investment in that, so definitely looking for your feedback on that once everything kind of leafs out. And I'm sort of interested in your thoughts on that relative to its condition last year. It was not inexpensive. And I'm sort of looking for commentary on that, because I'm contemplating what I might be able to do on the East Hampton stretch. Like, so speaking of Real Street, headed towards East Hampton, I mean, that's very badly overgrown. We hit it with the sidearm mower last year, but I think we might need to do something a little more intense than that. So I would ask users of those sections of trail to just stay in touch with me about your experience. We have a project in development, looking for a Mass Trails grant to redeck the overpasses at North Street and Main Street, and also going across Route 10 and one up by Look Park. Many of you may have noticed that those boards are completely Many of them are rotted through. We've got steel plates on them so that people don't injure themselves. They really need to be redecked. So we're hoping that we will receive a Mass Trails grant for that. We got a Mass Trails grant last year to pave the bike paths. So we're looking for that same grant again. I expect probably within the next 6 weeks to have 2 fairly significant sidewalk projects out to bid. One will be the money that council programmed from the hotel bridge. And one will be some spot repairs in a variety of locations around the city, kind of the worst, many of the worst spots. So primarily Bedford Terrace. I think we talked about the really bad condition of the sidewalks on both sides of Bedford Terrace. So those are going to be completely redone, as well as the stretch of sidewalk from Cooley Dickinson down to the high school. And last but not least, I just have a couple of comments about the high school. So yes, for those I've spoken to, we always continue to welcome and take comments on any of our projects. We do everything we can to incorporate those comments into our design, and we continue to do that with this design. Nothing has been finalized at this point, meaning I'm not at the 100% design. We haven't bid everything. We haven't bid anything. So like, it's not final. I think that my comments on this for everyone are just to reorient the conversation a little bit and understand that this project has been in development for several years. And what happens with these long developing projects is that sometimes we lose sight of like kind of where we came from. And where we came from was a place where we had a bicycle fatality, and we had several kids get clipped in crosswalks by drivers who did not yield. And those were the 2 major drivers of this project. And our charge was to increase bicycle safety and to get to a place where drivers were stopping for the kids in the crosswalk. And that, I think sometimes when you have a lot of conversation around a project, we've sort of gotten to this place where we're like in the parking lot trying to figure out where the buses are going to go, and like, how are the cars going to queue, and like, will the bike lane be separated or will it not be separated? But I think sometimes we have to reset and just get back to a place and say, like, what happened and how did we get to where we are, and what are we trying to accomplish with this project? And I think that the 2 major problems with this corridor were there is a lack of non-continuous bike lanes, and cars are simply not yielding to pedestrians in the crosswalk. And those were the 2 biggest problems in this corridor. And the design needs to resolve both of those things. And again, what has happened is we've sort of mushroomed into, well, now where are the parents going to drop the students off, and where are the buses going to go, and how are cars going to turn, right? And so now we start to sort of get into a layer of complication and financial complexity, and then utility complexity, because we have to understand any modifications we're making to the roadway has drainage implications, it has water line implications, it has sewer line implications. So part of what my job is to sort of reset this conversation and not lose sight of what we are trying to accomplish. We are trying to accomplish continuous bike lanes, and we are trying to get to a place where we are forcing people to stop for the kids in the crosswalk. And again, we had, I think, 3 incidents between children in the crosswalk and cars who simply did not yield. And so I think we just have to kind of remember where we came from. And for those people who are sort of engaged in the project now, who weren't necessarily engaged in the project in 2021 and 2022, that's where we came from. And we've sort of gotten to a little bit of a different place, but I think we have to bring this conversation back around to where we came from. So those are DPW updates. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, Donna, really appreciative to hear all of the work you've been doing with contractors to get the trail ready for the season. question, do we have a proactive plan to maintain it over the course of the year? Meaning, are there, dates where things are automatically going to happen? Like we're automatically going to be trimming this on this date and so forth? Or is it more of a wait and see what the season brings?
I don't have any further maintenance plans around this. I know that the Friends of the Trails, organize sort of work cleanup days. I mean, we've made a significant investment of time and money at this point, and I'd like to see how it leafs out and what it looks like. And then we can reassess as the season goes on.
It's interesting when you said about the East Hampton section, and I don't know if this is going to hold true, but the utility, as you all know, that section of shared use path is closed right now. And it maybe the lucky outcome of that is that while the utility company is replacing their poles, they're, mowing down the vegetation along that section. And so that might, provide a benefit, but that again remains to be seen because we're not allowed on it yet. So I'll keep my fingers crossed for that. Okay, 2 quick public comments before I do quick updates from planning. Alex, I think your hand was up first. So we'll do that.
Sure, I just want to say I agree with everything that Donna said. I think that we agree we want people to stop, and I think we just have a different opinion on the best way to do that. And I think all the recent publications have been focused on saying that we need to have a design where we allow humans to fail. And the way we allow humans to fail is by making them go slower. When someone's going 45 miles per hour, they can see less. They can slow down slower. It takes more time for them to slow down their car. So again, I don't know. I feel like that was directed at me, so I'm just responding. So, having vertical deflections, slowing down traffic like roundabouts do. People ignore lights. There's other issues with lights, and this is a high conflict area with lots of turning intersections, driveways, a vulnerable population. All of the studies, all of the recent publications from NACTO, and the updated MUTCD is talking about we have our speeds too high and we need to slow down traffic. So I'm trying to adopt those and use, and I just hope that that's what we can follow is the modern documentation and not the documentation that seems to have a 2005 or 1990s approach that Fuss and O'Neill seems to have used. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Benjamin?
Yeah, hi. So sorry about background noise. The only thing I would say, I understand that this Elm Street project has been years in the making, and I think it's really important to get it right. And we're in front of a school, and I can tell you, anytime you ever eat lunch at Tandem, if you have a seat that looks at the intersection in the center of Florence, I'm not sure. I'm sure this phenomena exists everywhere, but that light turning red means one more car to just about every driver who's the one who gets there as it turns red. And when that happens in front of the high school, when some kids who are maybe looking at their phones but realize they get the walk light, and the one more car goes through that red light at a speed that's excessive because they were trying to make that yellow, that's going to be a problem. So, I really don't think that signalized intersections are any sort of guarantee of safety. And I do think that building a world where people are more traveling at more appropriate speeds for school zones, and where we're all trying to look out for each other rather than trusting, equipment to keep us safe, is a safer world. So, I think I'll continue to advocate for a design that's more in keeping with what Alex is proposing, and we'll see how it goes. Thanks.
Thanks. Claudia?
I know you were almost done, but I just want to comment about the rail trail business. And it's not a competition for those of us who care about sidewalks and walking. We don't mean to have a competition with people who bicycle. I happen to do both. I ride my bike and I walk downtown. But it's sort of but, you know, the amount of money that's required to maintain the trails for bike, and I know people walk on the trails as well, but people who walk to get from point A to B, like to walk down to a store or whatever, rather than for recreation, those sidewalks don't get as much, sorry, I have a cough drop, attention as the rail trail. The rail trail, it seems to have a huge expense associated with it. And so just in terms of assets, when you were talking earlier about asset management, you know, I feel like it's important that the city look at this and try to take consideration for the pedestrians as well as for the bicyclists. So thanks.
Okay, so the only other item, I just have a couple of quick updates. One is we've just issued a press release finally about bike share, that we did receive a grant that will help us with expansion and operational costs. So you'll see that in the press hopefully in the next couple of days, which will really provide some stability until we find some long term funding for the program. And that's going to be distributed across the regional communities. And also I think I mentioned at the last meeting that the MassDOT is gearing up with the selection of a contractor for the Rocky Hill Greenway Phase 1 construction. We had a virtual pre-construction meeting with MassDOT at the beginning of March, but we will have to have an on-site pre-construction meeting, which will really sort of signal the beginning of the work. We hope that's going to be by the end of April, so that you'll see construction starting. It's actually going to be in the woods first, which will be from Route 66, starting on that end, moving towards East Hampton Road. And so all of that in the woods work will be the first part of the project before they come back out and make the connection up to Ice Pond Drive. But we hope to see that work starting, you know, by May, I think. And I think that's all the bike ped related updates that I have. So, any questions? All right. Any other items that anybody has in the committee? Awesome. Okay. Well, we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody. And let me know if you have any items for the next agenda. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.